There is something really special about the original Life is Strange, where so many games center around an epic battle, a grandiose story. This game is at its best when it explores simple and real themes. Love and friendship is what carries the power of this game, not the paranormal set pieces. The scope is restrained to focus on the relationship between two girls in a tiny town. It feels decisively and purposefully small. This is nowhere more apparent than in the setting for the game itself. We barely see a glimpse of the town of Arcadia Bay, only a handful of locations which are reused over and over again. Now I will talk more about that, but before, let's take a little detour through music theory. It is incredibly common in musical theater to reuse a piece of music multiple times. I'm not talking about chorus either, I mean motifs that are repeated in completely different pieces and contexts. These are called leitmotifs, and they are not an act of laziness on the part of the composer. The key is that, through repetition, those musical phrases are imbued with meaning. It may represent a place, an idea, a character, but what's important is that the reversing, modification, or sometimes even the absence of one can have a profound impact on the emotion of a scene. Leitmotifs are an incredibly powerful tool, and they repose on one simple idea: the power of repetition. A power that extends way beyond music, something that Life is Strange recognizes. From what the characters say or don't say, to the gun, the butterfly, the dose, so many elements are brought, reprised, modified, and through that are infused with meaning. An observation that extends also to the environment. Within this dynamic, the location in turn become leitmotifs in some way. Every space you end up revisiting at some point in the game, and every time the similarities, the differences, they remind you of what was or will be. That scene most obvious within the William is Alive act in the opening of episode 4. The Price's home is the exact same and yet so different, with the game purposefully bringing it to your attention. It brings back this familiar space you just left and unleashes all the emotions that are bound to it.
You have been here so many times before the episode 4 with Chloe, having fun with Chloe, listening to music. Going back here, without anything, you will directly see what you've lost.
It's also for that reason that the dream sequence at the end of episode 5 can be so powerful. Despite essentially being a nonsensical collage of ideas barely relevant to the story, it is able to play on all the memories already built up in these areas. It brings them back to hijack the emotion. Coincidentally, the section largely considered the weakest takes place in some nondescript void instead of a familiar location. Now, although the idea of repetition is made central in this whole nightmare, it manages to cheat in some sort, reposing on the power that the previous episode had, the emotions connected to the location you now know like home. This of course leaves to mention the greatest example. You can never escape the lighthouse. As much as Max's visions, it looms everywhere in the story. Where it begins, where it all ends. Where it begins is where it all. Now this all sounds great, but it still feels pretty much contrived. Although it seems that some of the reuse of space done by Life is Strange is very deliberate, aiming for a specific effect, there are still locations for which it does not seem to be really the case. For some of them, the repetition is not a leitmotiv. It is not meaningful. It seems to be there only for the sake of it. And before wasting our time trying to justify this absence of meaning through a convoluted mess of theories and analysis, it is perhaps best to first observe them at face value. The idea of Contrafacta is in some way the little brother of a leitmotiv. Similarly, it repeats a phrase through the piece, but it's different in the fact that it is not catalyst of an idea. A contrafacta is just repetition for the sake of repetition. It does not garner a specific meaning and has barely any emotional significance. But that does not make them worthless either. Crucially, Contrafactas bring cohesion to a piece, the feeling that it was thought of as a whole. In the same sense, the game reusing its places maintains a feeling of cohesion for Arcadia Bay, that of a real, living, breathing world. And so that reuse acts as a way to promote immersion, not immersion as a mindless marketing keyword, mind you, but as its true meaning inherent to video game, that feeling that the world you're in truly exists. Now I would like to step away from the original Life is Strange to take a look at the second game in the series, Before the Storm. And I don't think it is contentious to consider the latter not as good as the former, for many reasons I won't go into right now, but when I look at it through the lens of this reuse of space I've been talking about, I can't help but think of missed potential, because Before the Storm loves to introduce new locations and to promptly forget them in an instant. And I don't think it's a stretch to say this really undercuts the emotional impact of the story. The game tries to get emotional about getting kicked out of school when you never even went there before. Think of how much more powerful the scene at the Ambers could have been if we had prior context. We could have seen Rachel living her life before discovering her dad's secret, how her room changed after uncovering it, her trying to hide her new hate for him. Instead, the place has no substance, no prior attachment. Even the climax of the game takes place in an hospital introduced for the first time mere minutes before, as well as in the mill, which, for its defense, is a returning location, but that was only used once at the very beginning of the game. We are far from the significance of the lighthouse in the first game, and also from its impact. This is not actively or explicitly damaging the game, but it for sure misses out on a lot of power. There are also signs that the developer were conscious of this. In early version of the game, the player was actually meant to return to the mill several times before it was cut. This again shows that the developers are conscious of the significance of reusing space and the benefits it can yield. But then, why stray away from it? Why decide to make a bunch of new areas and to never reuse any of them if you realize the benefits of the approach? It seems that we are in a rare situation in which less work actually brings better results, so why not take advantage of it? I would argue this points to a larger trend that has impacted the games industry as a whole in semi-recent years, that of the ideal for content. The open world is a genre that has really overthrown the entire medium of video games in semi-recent years. Nowadays, it seems that everywhere you look, your favorite AAA studio is releasing the new adventure RPG, huge sandbox, Unreal Engine open world game. This really took off in the latter half of the 2010s. The extreme success of The Witcher 3, which kickstarted the reboot of a dying Assassin's Creed, then at Nintendo, Breath of the Wild saving Zelda and selling their most popular console. To be clear, at that point, the open world were far from a new concept. Huge sprawling RPGs already existed for years, but they very rarely reached the mainstream appeal and the overwhelming presence they enjoy now. You might notice that this specific type of game in a lot of ways is the antithesis of Life is Strange. Specifically the reuse I've been praising during this video. In fact, they take pride in being the biggest, hugest space imaginable. This transpires a need for content, for value. The playtime of a game has never been so prevalent. 200 hours, 500 hours, they proudly shout in the marketing. The game is no longer seen as a work of art having a point, but as a product in the market. A product that needs to justify the price as if the game wasn't enough unto itself. Before the Storm does so by adding levels, open worlds do so in a much weaker way. Out of fear of reusing space, they end up copying and pasting it over and over. Just look at Tears of the Kingdom, and it's hundreds of empty semi-cave or its duplicated entire overworld just below the surface. It's as repetitive, uninteresting, and without the benefits of emotional attachment, narrative significance, nor immersion. I don't know if you expected this to turn into a hit piece on open world games, but I'd like to point out that in recent years this has started to become a common sentiment. It seems like the desire for change, that open world apathy alongside UE5 hate, is starting to get wind. So maybe we should reconsider. Maybe it is worth taking the time to look at Life is Strange. Maybe it is time, once again, to make small games. Well, that's it with the script. I hope you enjoyed the video. I for sure enjoyed making it. There are so many things I wanted to talk about, but I left out to make the length a little bit more manageable. Yeah, don't expect any kind of regular upload from me. I'm pretty busy and I just did that for fun, but you can still subscribe to show me you enjoyed. Anyways, that's it. Ciao.